Welcome to the Igniting the CEO Within podcast, where we interview successful high-level professionals to discover lessons they've learned throughout their career that can help ignite that CEO within you. I'm Mark McFatridge, and I'll be your host for the next 15 minutes or so. Our show is sponsored by Quaid, a nationwide community of CEOs and entrepreneurs. Quaid has developed Launchpad, which offers an opportunity for experienced executive coaches and strategic advisors to become licensed circle directors. After completing the Launchpad program, you'll lead your own peer advisory circles, helping other CEOs and entrepreneurs excel in their professional and personal lives while providing a community of accountability, challenge, and support. If you'd like to learn more, please go to quaidcircle.com. Super pumped for our show today. We get to hang out with Kristi Broom, who is the co-founder of Talent Rewire. She's out of Minneapolis, St. Paul. Kristi, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me today.
I am excited. And so I'm just going to jump right into it.
Yeah.
So in a lot of the work that you do and throughout your career, you've had exposure to all kinds of leaders. And my guess is you've seen some excellent leaders and maybe some not so excellent leaders. If you had to dial it down into one or two leadership traits that separate those excellent ones from the less than excellent ones, what would that be?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question and I think timely. And so I'll share with you the lens through which I look at this today. So
Perfect.
Talent Rewire is a company that helps organizations distill the workforce of the future. And so as AI is coming into the scene and doing all sorts of things with efficiency and automation, it's changing the way work gets done. And it's also changing the role of the leader. Because
Mhm.
if we think about how organizations establish the role of leader in the organization, it was for managing people and coaching people and all of the things that will be part of my answer. But it was also for things like communication, because back in the day, we didn't have electronic communication. And so management layers became communication layers. And so as we think about the world of AI and its ability to do some of that communication work, I think the traits of good leaders become even more important. So that was the lens to say, I
Mhm.
see and I've seen in my career history that the most impactful leaders are those that really take a human first approach. So they lead with empathy. They coach with purpose. So they're looking for a connection with their team, right? That helps create shared success. Those are the leaders that I have most enjoyed working for. That is the type of leader I have always striven to be. And I think in the future, as we see AI do more and more work, that is the type of leader that I think will continue to be needed and excel within organizations.
That's really fascinating. And yeah, if you could, I'd love to dig more into that. And how do you see that? How do you see that empathy playing a huge role with everything that is seemingly being automated today? Or there's the
Yeah.
threat that everything's going to be automated and all that kind of stuff. Tell me more about the empathy component of that,
Yeah. 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 I'll tell you by way of another story.
please.
Um, So I use ChatGPT almost daily, and
Hmm.
I think of ChatGPT sort of as my coworker. I work from home. I certainly do have coworkers, but for the most part, I'm working kind of individually, and so ChatGPT has sort of been that idea partner. That if I were in an office setting with coworkers, I would be able to bounce ideas off of. In fact, I've named my ChatGPT. Her name is Mona because that just helps me kind of frame the conversation, right?
Hmm.
A couple of weeks ago, I made a really terrible mistake. I was feeling very horrible about what I had done, and I wasn't able to connect with any human individual to talk with. So I started typing to Mona. I said, "Here's what I did. I'm feeling really bad about it. I don't know. I just need to write about this." Um, and ChatGPT, my AI coworker, responded. And it was sort of this faux empathy, right? Like it was
Hmm.
enough to get me past the emotion I was feeling at the time,
Right.
but it wasn't empathy because I realized, a couple of hours later, if I had really spoken to a human being, that human being would check on me again. And that human being
Mhm.
would check on me again the next day. That human being would, kind of make sure that I had gotten through that experience. And AI doesn't do that.
Mhm.
And so I think there's this line as we continue to automate more with AI, and it sounds human like. In fact, I've named mine, right? So we can,
Mhm.
sort of associate AI as a human, but there it can only go so far. So it doesn't experience emotion. And because it doesn't experience emotion itself, it can't share that emotion with another person. And so, again, as I think about what leadership means in the future, as leaders are grappling with managing these emotionless, you know,
Mhm.
autonomous things,
Right.
as well as people, I think being able to, again, be maybe overly human with each other because we as humans will have human like experiences with these AI agents that are doing some of the work.
I
Is
I
that a weird story?
No, it's awesome, because I was scared for a minute of where you were going, that you were going to talk positively about your empathetic experience with Mona,
Mhm.
so I'm excited that you went the other way, because I'm nervous about that component of it, of a whole generation growing up with talking to their AI person
Yeah.
thing, and developing relationships, and that when they're built to appease you, appeal to you at a minimum,
Yep.
that's not healthy, right? Because you don't have somebody that's going to go, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard.
Mhm.
That's not what it's built to do, and which is not right either, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm glad you told that story, and I'm glad it went the way it did, because I was like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna debate that?
How am I gonna recover from this person who thinks
Right,
her
right.
AI is human? No, I think it is. I think that's a really important point, right? When I think about, again, the best leaders I've had didn't always tell me I was right. In fact, they often told me I was wrong. They often told me, where I was making mistakes, but then cared enough to redirect me. And you're
Mhm.
right that AI won't do that, right? I mean, it's at least not in its current state, but probably not ever. It's not built to tell us we're wrong, and it
Yeah.
certainly can't emote or exhibit care in redirecting people so that they can learn from that mistake and succeed the next time.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay, you are self-aware enough that you realize that it was faux empathy, to use your words.
Mhm.
How do we work as and we can keep it at the employee level? How do we work with employees that don't have that awareness, or the ability to discern that this is faux empathy, and they just lean into it, and almost I'm making up things, almost becomes a debate between the AI and their boss. How do we
Mhm.
navigate that? That seems like a weird thing to even talk about.
It's a weird thing to talk about, isn't it? And I think it's why. So I
Welcome to
think
the show.
welcome to the show. Guess what we're talking about today? Bots that are acting like humans.
Yeah.
Um, I think we're at this inflection point. And so I've been the work that I've been doing for the past 18 months really centers around this intersection between AI and people. And Talent Rewire is a new company, but various other work that I've been doing through Rising Tide Cooperative and other companies has had this same intersection. And last year, as we were talking with organizations, their AI strategy was a lot of technology. AI was a technology project. So they were
Mhm.
looking at governance, and they were looking at tool selection, and they were looking at, how many licenses they needed and what the budget would be. And almost as if switch flipped on January 1st, the conversation changed. And so now we're talking to a lot of leaders who are saying, yeah, but I'm not really sure my people are going to use it or use it correctly or that they know how to, because the tool that we used inside of the organization is different than the myriad of options that each of us has as individuals outside of the workplace. And so I see leaders really trying to answer the question of, how do I deploy this technology project successfully and effectively within my organization. So I don't get to that point of employees trusting advice that's not real, or employees getting this faux empathetic response from their AI when really they should be trusting their human colleagues and their human leaders. And so I think the organizations that are having that conversation with us or others are going to be the solution, the prevention to what you just described of a bunch of employees who don't really know how to operate with AI and are a bit too trusting of it.
Hmm.
And by virtue of that, are leading themselves and perhaps the organization to kind of scary results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yes, that's obviously something that we've got to deal with and put into play. It's just a fascinating evolution, and the speed at which that is moving and changing is, it's just, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is. In lots of good ways.
Yeah,
And
for
definitely
sure.
there definitely needs to be guardrails, right? And just common usage norms that we need to establish. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that type of situation, how are you working with companies? What does that look like? Yeah, what does that look like, and how are you working with companies and that type of thing?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a three part. So Talent Rewire is a diagnostic tool. And so we look at the work of the organization and the people within it. And we come up with an assessment that ultimately leads to a roadmap of which work should AI do in the future, right? What is it best suited for? Does a lot of things really incredibly well and certainly much faster than we do as humans.
Hmm.
And so we look at those tasks and we present a roadmap or a plan to organizations that say, here's what we think you should automate and why. Um, but then there's this gap, right? Because there are people who have done that work in the past. And so we are working with organizations to say, you know, Kristi's job may have just been cut in half. However, the skills that Kristi has, the reason you hired her, are still important. And so let's figure out some adjacent work and a plan to upskill me in the areas where I don't have capability currently so that I can still create meaningful impact for the organization, even though my role is going to be redesigned. And so Talent Rewire is the tool that does that. It provides really a roadmap. And then we provide both strategic guidance for how to best implement that and consulting around what does this look like in practicality, because of course a roadmap is only as good as the next few months and the business conditions under which you leverage it, and then things need to adjust and change. And then we also provide organizational enablement. So some of those guardrails, establishing those norms, helping to ensure that employees know how best to use AI and where, they still need to interact with humans as colleagues and leaders. So yeah, those are the solutions that we're really excited to work with organizations. Um, and we're finding again, it's almost as if a switch flipped where
Yeah.
organizations really are concerned about kind of that implementation and the organizational change that is necessary for AI to be successful for them.
That's really cool. I love that you're doing that because, right now, a lot of what we see in our peer groups are people that are more than AI curious. They're ready to commit, but the one thing holding them back oftentimes is the rapid change that's going on, that they're afraid to put a stake in the ground, right? Because they're afraid that if they put a stake in the ground today, that 2 weeks from now, it's already going to be outdated. And now what do we have to do? And so what would you say to people that are in that situation, that they're waiting for the final product, which obviously is not coming anytime soon?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so I think it is important to acknowledge that we are in AI infancy. So, I think while there's been a lot of progress made and the tools are sort of starting to stabilize a bit, we're still in infancy. So there is a real threat to, getting jumping in too deeply into the waters. So I think as we work with organizations, the recommendation is to not think so specific that you can't back out if the tool were to change. But also practically speaking, most organizations are sticking with kind of one main large language model. And so Microsoft has Copilot, and it's very easy to implement in organizations that are already using the Microsoft suite. So we see a lot of Copilot companies, and that's great. That's their tool. So stick with Copilot, watch it evolve, right?
Mhm.
And then maybe
Right.
there's a couple kind of specialty tools that help in various areas or departments, but find that platform, right? Gemini for Google is also, equally good at operating across the Google suite of products. So, if you're a Google shop, explore Gemini. It's got some amazing capabilities there as well. And then
Mhm.
for organizations that don't use either, is there an organization that wouldn't use either? I don't know. I can't imagine.
Right.
Certainly,
Right.
probably companies you and I are talking to. But in that case, pick one of the others. Pick Claude or Perplexity or a ChatGPT, buy a paid subscription, buy a team-based license, and just watch that. Because the reality is, while they all came to market with different areas of specialty, the differentiation is closing in. And so, I think as long as organizations don't try to keep up with all of them at once, they will be well
Yeah.
served. And they really can't make a bad choice.
That's great advice. That's great advice. All
Yeah.
right, let me flip it as we start to wrap up here. One last question. This has well, probably nothing to do with AI. Going back to the leadership component, and I want you to think back to 21-year-old Kristi,
Okay.
and I want you to think about one thing that you wish she would have known that you've learned between then and now.
Mm. Hmm. Um, it's a timely question. I just met with my very first boss who hired 22-year-old Christy yesterday. So it's timely from that perspective. What do I wish? I wish I would have known that careers take many paths.
Hmm.
And I think so when I was in my 20s, um, I was, you know, I very much thought success meant climbing the ladder. And I remember taking these steps and thinking once I had achieved a people manager position, I had to hire someone because that's what you do. And I had to fire someone because that's what you do. And I had to, like I had to do all the things that people managers do because that would get me to the next rung on the ladder. And so now I think that's kind of ridiculous. Kind of ridiculous. Um, but I didn't know that then. And I think that the good news is the world has evolved from that state and because of COVID and just careers and job markets where I don't think that's probably in my kids' minds at this point.
Yeah,
Um, I don't think that's as ingrained, but I think it's important for people to understand and for leaders to continue to coach people that careers can take many forms and there isn't necessarily one path to success that is even prescriptive for every person.
I love that. Well, and so now tie it back to AI. 21-year-old Christy had no idea AI was coming around. So amazing how everything works out in that fathom. So
That's right.
thank you so much. Hey, you've already shared about what a kind of an engagement would look like with Talent Rewire. How can people get a hold of you?
Yes. So it's Kristi, Kristi for our listeners, at talentrewire.ai. So when you think of AI, think of Talent Rewire. So Kristi, Kristi at talentrewire.ai or talentrewire.ai is our website. And I'd be happy to chat with you through that as well.
Christy, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom on this. These conversations are unscripted on purpose because I never know where they're going to go, and they always end up being in the right place. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, y'all, we did it again. We found another amazing leader to walk us through something we had no idea we were interested in. So I'm really grateful for Christy to hang out with us today. As we wrap up, I want to remind you that Igniting the CEO Within is sponsored by Quade, a nationwide community of CEOs and entrepreneurs Quaid has created Launchpad, which provides an opportunity for experienced executive coaches and strategic advisors to become licensed circle directors and significantly impact the lives of CEOs and entrepreneurs. To find out more, visit quaidcircle.com. Until next time, keep igniting that CEO within you. I'm Mark McFatridge. Thanks for listening.